The rain came down in sheets, drenching the earth beneath our feet, the wind howling like a beast hungry for blood. We ran through the mud, through the night, our footsteps muffled by the storm. I led them, my eyes sharp, heart steady. 10 women, 10 warriors. We weren't just running from the soldiers, we were running from betrayal. Men who had promised peace and delivered nothing but death. I could feel the weight of the past pressing on me, the faces of the dead, the burning village, the screams that still echoed in my mind. My father's face, my mother's eyes, wide and empty, the ones we lost, the ones who trusted. They'd been slaughtered by men wearing the same uniform as the ones hunting us now. Every step felt like a war, every breath a battle to keep moving. I couldn't stop. I couldn't let them catch us. I glanced back at the women following me, my sisters, my daughters, my blood. They were scared, but they didn't show it. They didn't have the luxury of fear. Fear had been stripped from us a long time ago. All we had now was the will to survive, and even that felt like it was slipping. We weren't just running for our lives, we were running for something bigger. We were running for the future of our people. We had to keep going. We had to keep fighting, even when it felt like the world had already given up on us. I could hear the sound of horses in the distance, their hooves pounding the earth like thunder. They were coming. I didn't know how many, but I knew they were close. They always were. "Keep moving," I whispered to the women behind me, my voice barely a breath against the storm. "We'll make it. We have to." If you like what you're hearing, leave a comment, give us a thumbs up, and subscribe. Let's keep the conversation going. They nodded, silent. There was nothing left to say. The storm hadn't let up. It was as if the sky itself was trying to drown us, forcing us to our knees. The rain was heavy, relentless, pounding against the earth and our backs. Every step we took was heavier than the last. The women were exhausted, the youngest shivering, the older ones gritting their teeth to keep from collapsing. The wind bit through our clothes like ice, but we kept moving, as if the storm could somehow wash away the shame and the loss. We were so close. I could feel it in the air, the smell of the earth, the cold, the wind that swept across the plains. A break, a chance. But it wasn't just the storm we were running from. It was what came before it, what chased us from our homes, the betrayal that had followed us from the valley, the soldiers with their rifles, the lies we'd been fed. And now, a stranger's land loomed before us. A man we didn't know, but one we might have to trust. Tobias Redmont, a man whose name had already carved itself into the thread of survival. I wasn't sure if we could make it. My legs were stiff with cold, and the voices in my head screamed for rest, but I couldn't stop. If we stopped, they would catch us. They would wipe us out, and I would not let that happen. Not to my people. Not again. As we approached the gate, the rain soaked us to the bone. The house loomed in the distance, a dark shape against the gray sky. I saw the light flickering in the window, warmth inside, something we hadn't felt in days. There was no choice now, no decision left. I motioned for the others to stop, and we huddled together, the wind howling around us, the rain pouring down like rivers. I stood at the front, my eyes scanning the dark shadows behind the gate. Could he help us? Or would he be the one to turn us away, to condemn us to die in the storm? "Stay close," I whispered to the women. They nodded, but there was fear in their eyes. The kind of fear that only comes when you have nowhere left to turn. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't trust him. I hadn't trusted any white man for a long time. They had killed my people, destroyed our homes, lied to us, betrayed us in the name of land, of power, of greed. I had promised myself I would never again trust someone who wore their skin like armor. Never. But the wind howled louder, and the sound of hooves in the distance reminded me we didn't have the luxury of pride anymore. We needed help. And if Tobias Redmont would be our only chance, then we had no choice but to take it. The door opened just as I reached the gate. I heard the sound of boots on wood, the creak of hinges, and then the silhouette of a man standing there. His face was shadowed, but I could see the outline of his features. Broad shoulders, a steady stance. I didn't move, and neither did he. We stood there for a moment, measuring each other in silence. His eyes flicked over me, over the women behind me, his gaze sharp but unreadable. I kept mine steady on him. Finally, he spoke. "You've come far." His voice was low, calm, almost too calm for a man in a storm like this. His accent was thick, rough, like someone who'd spent too many years alone. "What do you want?" His words weren't harsh, but they were firm, and they cut through me like a knife. There it was. The test. The line we crossed. Could I trust him? Could we trust him? I met his gaze, feeling the weight of my people behind me, the weight of my father's legacy, of the blood we'd lost. I had no room for mistakes now. My voice was steady, but my heart beat hard in my chest. "We need shelter," I said. "For the night, the soldiers are hunting us." His eyes didn't leave mine. For a moment, I saw something flicker, something deep, a shadow that passed over him too quickly for me to catch. He looked at the women behind me, their faces pale and tired, their eyes wide with the kind of fear that only comes when you're running out of time. His gaze softened for just a moment, and then it hardened again, like a wall he had to build. "You're Apache," he said, almost to himself. "What do you want with me?" The words stung. Of course he could see who we were, could see the dirt on our faces, the way our clothes hung on us like rags, but that didn't mean he knew us, knew what we'd been through, what we were fighting for. "We need a place to hide," I repeated, my voice quiet. "Just for tonight." Tobias Redmond stood there in the rain, the weight of the world between us. I could feel the storm rising again, not from the clouds above, but from the space between us. It felt like the air itself was waiting for something to happen. The wind kicked up and the rain pelted us both. The moment stretched like a rope ready to snap. But then finally he spoke. "All right," he said, his voice gruff but steady. "Get inside." I didn't trust him, not yet. But I had no choice. We had no choice. As the women moved past me, I hesitated for just a second. I searched his face for any sign of trickery, any sign that he was playing us, trying to gain our trust only to betray us later. But I found nothing. Just the cold, steady gaze of a man who had lived alone long enough to know the meaning of survival. I nodded, turning to the others, leading them into the warmth of the house. But in my heart, the doubt didn't fade. It settled in like the storm outside. Could we trust him? Would he truly help us? Or would we find out too late that we'd made a mistake? I didn't know the answer yet, but I knew this. Whatever happened, it was too late to turn back now. We were already in the hands of a man we couldn't read. And I would not let the past, no matter how much it haunted me, stop me from protecting what little we had left. We huddled inside Tobias Redmond's house, the warmth of the fire a stark contrast to the chill in my bones. The storm still raged outside, but it was quieter in here, safer for now. The women were resting, their faces tired, wary but relieved. I stood near the window, the heavy rain smearing the world outside, as if washing it all away. But no matter how hard the storm tried to cleanse the land, it couldn't erase what had happened. It couldn't wash away the blood. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The bodies of our people, torn apart by men who wore badges and carried rifles. The screams that still haunted me, the fire that had taken my home, the faces of the ones I lost. My family. My mother's face, her eyes wide with fear before she fell to the ground. My father's silence, his death a shadow I couldn't outrun. Why do we keep fighting? I asked myself, the question a whisper that barely reached my ears. Why keep going when it feels like the world has turned its back on us? There were nights when I didn't want to fight anymore. Nights when the weight of it all felt too much loss, too much death, too much betrayal. I glanced over at Tobias. He was sitting by the fire, cleaning his rifle, his brow furrowed in concentration. He didn't seem afraid, didn't seem worried about the soldiers coming for us. He was calm, too calm. And that calm, it made me question everything. Could I trust him? I had told myself I wouldn't trust a white man again. Not after everything I had seen. Not after the betrayals that had cost us so much. My people had been wronged. Our land stolen, our families slaughtered, our children sold like cattle. The pain of all that betrayal gnawed at me like a hunger that wouldn't go away. Tobias might be different, but what if he wasn't? What if he was just another one of them? Another man who would turn his back when it mattered most? I didn't know. I couldn't know. But there he was. Helping us, letting us in when the storm could have killed us, letting us take shelter in his house when the soldiers were so close we could hear their boots pounding the ground in pursuit. I closed my eyes, remembering the moment when I'd first seen him. I had approached his door, the desperation in my bones, the cold gnawing at my flesh. I had expected him to turn us away, to tell us to leave, to call the soldiers. But he didn't. He opened the door and let us in. For a moment, I thought maybe he wasn't like the others. But even now, as we sat in his house, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that this man, this Tobias Redmond, wasn't who he seemed to be. My instincts screamed at me to stay alert, to not let my guard down. But what if I was wrong? What if he was the one who could help us? What if we needed him? I walked to the fire and sat across from him, my eyes fixed on the flames. The heat from the fire felt good, but it didn't chase away the coldness inside me. It didn't warm the fear that twisted in my gut. Tobias didn't look up from his rifle. His hands worked quickly, cleaning the weapon with practiced ease. But his silence was more than just focus. It was a barrier. He was hiding something. I could feel it. He had to be. No one could live in the world we lived in and not be hiding something. "How do I know you're not just waiting for the soldiers to come?" I finally asked, my voice low, almost lost in the crackling of the fire. "How do I know you're not going to sell us out when they come looking?" Tobias didn't flinch, didn't even look up. "I told you, Ayana," he said, his voice steady, but something in it. Something made me uneasy. "I'm not the enemy." His words were simple, but they didn't reach me. Not really, not yet. I had heard words like that before. Words that were meant to calm, to assure, to make you believe in something that wasn't true. I had trusted before, I had believed before, and look where it had gotten me. I looked at him, my heart beating fast, the doubt clawing at me. "And if you're lying?" I asked. "What happens then?" For a moment, Tobias paused. Then he set the rifle down beside him and met my gaze. His eyes were hard, but not with anger. They were hard with something else, something I hadn't seen in a long time, determination. "I'm not lying to you," he said, his voice as rough as the land he lived on. "You've been running too long, I get that. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to stay alive." His words hit me like a slap. They were simple, direct, but they held weight. More weight than I wanted to admit. And for a split second I wondered, what if he was telling the truth? What if he wasn't like the others? But then I remembered what the soldiers did to my village, remembered the pain, the loss, the betrayal. I couldn't afford to be wrong. Not again. "Stay alive," I whispered, my voice breaking as the weight of it all pressed down on me. What does that even mean anymore? What are we fighting for, Tobias? We've lost everything. He didn't answer right away. His gaze softened for a moment, but only for a moment. Then he reached over, took a sip of water from his canteen, and said quietly, "You fight because there's still something left to fight for. Even if you can't see it, you fight because you're still breathing." I stared at him, my mind racing. "And what about you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Why do you fight?" He leaned back, his eyes searching the fire like it held answers he didn't have. "I don't fight for myself anymore," he said. "I fight because someone has to. Someone has to stand up for the ones who can't fight." I didn't know what to say. His words felt like a weight pressing down on me. He spoke with a calmness that I didn't understand, but that made me feel like maybe, just maybe, he was telling the truth. But the doubt still lingered, still gnawed at me. I had spent my life running from men who said they wanted peace, only to find violence in their wake. How was this any different? But Tobias wasn't like the others. I could see that now. His words were simple, but they held a quiet honesty that made me wonder if maybe, just maybe, we weren't as alone as I thought. I didn't know if I could trust him, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure I needed to fight alone anymore. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to hope. The wind howled through the cracks in the cabin, carrying the scent of rain and dust. Outside, the storm still raged, but it wasn't the rain that made my heart race. It was the sound of hooves, the unmistakable pounding of horses approaching, their rhythmic beat echoing in the silence of the night. They were coming, the soldiers. The ones who had hunted us for days. I could hear their voices over the wind, low and gruff, like dogs chasing after a scent. My fingers tightened around the knife at my side. I didn't want to face them. I didn't want to fight. But there was no more running, no more hiding. I stood at the window, my eyes scanning the darkness beyond the cabin. I could barely make out shapes moving in the distance. Shadows, riders, closing in faster than I wanted to admit. The storm was a cover, yes, but it wasn't enough to hide us. It never was. The others were inside, huddled together by the fire, their faces pale with fear. They didn't speak, didn't need to. We all knew what was coming, but none of them had the fire that burned in my chest, the fire that told me if I didn't stand, we'd all fall. I looked around the room. The youngest one, Lila, was clutching her baby sister, her face scrunched in terror. The older women were whispering, their hands trembling, preparing to run, preparing to hide, but there was nowhere left to go. The weight of the moment pressed down on me like a boulder. "Get up," I said, my voice steady despite the thudding of my own heart. I could feel Tobias's eyes on me as he leaned against the door frame, rifle in hand, but I didn't look at him. I couldn't afford to. "We're not running anymore." They looked at me, each one hesitant, unsure. I could see it in their eyes, the doubt, the fear. They were waiting for me to say what they all wanted to hear, that it would be okay, that we would make it out alive, but I couldn't say that. Not with the sound of hooves growing louder, closer. There were no guarantees anymore, only survival. "I'll fight," I said, voice low but firm. "We stand here, and we fight, or we die trying." Tobias moved to my side, his hand brushing mine for a moment. I didn't look at him, didn't let myself be distracted by his presence. Not now. I had to stay focused. We were outnumbered, outgunned, and yet, there was a part of me that knew this was our only chance. The soldiers were near. I could hear the creaking of their saddles, the shuffle of boots in the mud. I felt the tension in my chest tighten, the urge to run, to find a way out. But then I remembered what we had already lost, what we had already given up. My heart ached for those we had buried, for my family, my people, who would never be seen again. They hadn't fought, they had run, they had tried to hide, and it hadn't worked. I couldn't let the same happen again. I wouldn't. "Get your weapons," I ordered. "Ready yourselves." The women moved swiftly, but with the hesitation of those who had never been in a battle. They weren't warriors, not like I was, but they were my people, and I would die before I let them fall. I moved to the door, pushing past Tobias, my body tense with the weight of the decision I had made. The air outside was thick with moisture, the storm raging on as if the heavens themselves were at war with the earth. The soldiers were close now. I could see them, their outlines sharp against the storm's glow. The tension in the air was palpable, and I could hear their voices shouting orders. They didn't know what they were about to walk into. "Stay low," I told the women. "We don't give them the advantage." I turned to Tobias, my eyes locking with his for the first time since we'd entered this hell. He didn't speak, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. He wasn't a fighter. He wasn't one of us. But he had helped us. He had given us shelter when he didn't have to. And now, he stood beside us, ready to face whatever came. For a moment, I felt a flicker of something. Hope. Or was it just the fire of survival? Either way, I pushed it aside. Now wasn't the time to think about anything other than the battle ahead. The soldiers were here. They had come for us, and we would fight. I heard Tobias's voice behind me, soft but steady. "What do we do?" I didn't answer him right away. I was already thinking, already calculating. We give them a fight they won't forget. My hand moved instinctively to the rifle Tobias had left by the door, the weight of it heavy in my grasp. I didn't like guns, but I knew how to use them. I took a deep breath. The air was thick, almost choking, and the ground beneath my boots felt like it was sinking into the earth. The soldiers were here, and I knew what I had to do. But in that moment, a voice inside me screamed, "What if we fail? What if we die here, tonight, in this place?" The thought made my blood run cold, but it was too late to turn back. I stepped outside, the rain pouring down in torrents, my heart hammering in my chest. I could hear the soldiers shouting now, their boots thundering closer. They were almost at the door. I stood tall, my back straight, and waited. The first man came into view, his silhouette clear against the storm's glow. He raised his rifle, ready to fire. But I was faster. The shot rang out before he could pull the trigger, and he fell. His body hit the ground with a dull thud, and I moved quickly, my instincts guiding me. The battle had begun. As the fighting broke out, the women moved with surprising speed. They weren't warriors, but they were fierce. They were fighting for their lives, and that made all the difference. Tobias was behind me, firing his rifle with surprising accuracy. He wasn't the fighter I was, but he was holding his ground, and for that, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of respect. We fought for hours, the sounds of gunfire and shouting blending with the storm. The soldiers, unprepared for the fury of our resistance, faltered. We were outnumbered, but we had something they didn't: the will to survive. I knew that, and I knew, as long as I had breath in my lungs, I would never stop fighting. The storm had passed, but the air was thick with the weight of what was coming. The soldiers were near, their voices carried by the wind, too close now to be ignored. I could hear the desperation in their shouts, the urgency in their steps. They weren't just looking for us anymore. They were hunting us. The cabin was our last refuge, the only place that could offer shelter for a moment longer. But shelter wasn't enough. We needed something more. We needed to fight. I turned to Tobias, standing beside me, his rifle in hand. I could see the conflict in his eyes. It wasn't just the storm that clouded his gaze. It was the doubt, the fear, the hesitance of a man who had lived his life in peace, far removed from the violence that had shaped me, shaped us all. "You need to fight, Tobias," I said, my voice low but steady. There was no room for softness anymore. The time for questioning was over. "We can't win this without you. We can't do this without a stand." He shifted uneasily, his hands tightening around the rifle. He wasn't a warrior. He had never been a warrior. I could see that in the way he moved, in the way his eyes flicked to the door as if he expected the soldiers to burst in at any moment. But that was the thing about survival. It didn't matter whether you were ready or not. It didn't matter if you were a soldier or a rancher. When it came down to it, all that mattered was whether you could choose to fight. Tobias hesitated, his jaw tightening as he looked at me. "I never wanted this," he muttered, almost to himself. "I never wanted any of this." I understood. I had never wanted this either. None of us had. But the truth of it was simple and ugly. We were here because of choices made long before us, and now those choices were hunting us down. I took a step closer to him, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "None of us asked for this," I said. "None of us wanted to fight. But we're already fighting, Tobias. Whether we want to or not. The soldiers are coming, and they won't stop until we're dead or gone. You either stand with us, or you run." His eyes flickered with something, fear maybe, something I had seen before in my own people, the hesitation before battle. But I also saw something else, something I hadn't expected, a flicker of resolve. He exhaled slowly, his fingers brushing the edge of his rifle. "You think I don't know what's at stake?" he said, his voice rough. "You think I don't know what they'll do if we lose?" I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. The soldiers, if they won, would destroy us. They would destroy everything we had left, the lives we'd fought for, the lives that still had meaning to me. "I know," I said softly, "but that's why we fight. That's why we stand." I placed my hand on his shoulder, feeling the tension in his body, the fear in his heart. He wasn't a warrior, but right now he needed to be. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about everyone who's been hunted, everyone who's been forgotten. If we don't fight, they'll never know we were here. We won't be remembered. His gaze softened just for a moment. I saw the man beneath the fear, the man who had seen enough loss to understand that standing was better than falling. I saw him make a choice that felt like it came from somewhere deep within him. Tobias wasn't a fighter. He wasn't a killer. But in that moment, he wasn't just a rancher. He was a man willing to stand for what was right, no matter the cost. "I'm with you," he said, his voice low but sure. "What do you need me to do?" I didn't hesitate. "I need you to be ready. When they come, we fight. Together. We're not running anymore. We're going to make them understand what happens when you push people too far." He nodded. The doubt in his eyes wasn't gone, but something else had replaced it, something I hadn't expected to see in a man like him. Resolve. I turned away from him, moving toward the others. The women were gathered around the fire, their faces etched with the weariness of survival. They had known violence, they had seen it up close, but even they were scared now. The weight of the unknown hung heavy in the air. They didn't speak, they didn't need to. They knew what was coming. I felt Tobias's eyes on me as I moved back to the window, peering out through the rain-soaked glass. The soldiers were near, too near. I could hear them clearly now. Their voices, harsh and angry, cutting through the wind like knives. "They'll be here soon," I said, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. I looked at Tobias again, meeting his eyes. "Are you ready?" He didn't answer right away. He just nodded, his hand resting on the rifle stock. But there was something different in the way he stood now, something solid, something that made me believe for the first time that maybe we had a chance. "I'm ready," he said, his voice rough with the weight of his decision. "Let's do this." The tension in the room lifted just a little. The women were ready, Tobias was ready, I was ready. The battle was coming. We could feel it in our bones. But there was one thing I knew for sure. We weren't going down without a fight. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something like hope, a fragile, flickering thing. But it was there. We had Tobias now. And together, we were more than just a handful of survivors. We were a force to be reckoned with. The storm raged on outside, but inside, in the silence before the storm, we made our stand, together. And that was enough. For now, the air was thick with smoke and gunpowder as the soldiers charged. Their shouts echoed through the rain, their boots hitting the ground in a rhythm that sent fear straight into my bones. The storm had turned the land into a battlefield, the wet earth slipping beneath our feet. But it didn't matter. Nothing mattered now but the fight. I stood at the front, my rifle in my hands, my body aching from the strain of the last few days. But I couldn't afford to feel the pain. Not now. Not when the soldiers were upon us. "Ready yourselves," I shouted to the women behind me, my voice rough with the weight of what we were about to do. "We fight or we die." There was no time to be scared, no time to doubt. The soldiers were here, and this time, there would be no running. I raised my rifle, taking aim at the first soldier who came into view. His face was filled with that same arrogance that I had seen so many times before, the belief that they were in control, that they were the ones who decided who lived and who died. But they didn't know me. They didn't know us. The first shot rang out, and the soldier fell to the ground. But the battle didn't stop there. It was just beginning. I didn't wait to see if he was dead. There was no time to check. The next soldier was already moving toward us, his rifle raised. I fired again and again and again. My hands were steady, my eyes sharp. This was what I had been trained for. This was what I had learned to do since I was a child. The women behind me were fighting too. They weren't just standing by. They were moving, their hands steady, their movements fluid. They had been through this before. We had all been through this before, but it wasn't easy. The soldiers were many, and we were few. Every time I pulled the trigger, I could feel the weight of my actions, the weight of the lives we were taking. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't afford to hesitate. "Stay strong," I shouted, my voice cutting through the chaos. "We fight for our people, for our future." My words didn't feel like enough, but they were all I had. I fought for the women beside me, for the children who would never know the horrors we had seen. I fought because I couldn't let them fall, not after everything we had lost. The sound of gunfire was deafening, but I kept moving, my rifle in hand, my body working on instinct. I had learned to fight in silence, to move without thinking, to let the fear pass through me like wind. I had learned to push it all aside, the pain, the doubt, the memories. I fought for my people, for my family, for the future that was slipping through our fingers. The soldiers were relentless, but we were relentless too. Every time they came at us, we pushed back. Every time they thought they had us cornered, we fought harder. I could hear Tobias's rifle firing behind me, the sound of his shots a strange comfort. He wasn't a warrior, but he was standing with us, fighting with us. I glanced over my shoulder for a split second, just long enough to see him take down a soldier. He wasn't a warrior, but he was holding his ground, and that was enough. I turned back to the fight, my heart pounding in my chest. There was blood on the ground now, on my hands, on my face, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. The soldiers were closing in, their lines tightening, but we weren't going to give up. We weren't going to fall without a fight. "Don't stop!" I yelled, my voice hoarse, desperate. "We fight for them. We fight for everyone who can't fight." The women moved faster now, with more confidence. We were more than just a group of refugees. We were warriors, and we would not let the soldiers take us without a fight. The next few minutes were a blur of gunfire, shouting, and movement. I don't remember much, just flashes, soldiers falling, the sound of rifles firing, the faces of the women beside me, their determination matching my own. But in the middle of the chaos, something broke inside me, something I had been holding on to for so long. A memory, a feeling, a sense of something lost. I could see the faces of my people, my family, my tribe, standing before me, their eyes filled with trust. They had given me everything, and now it was my turn to give everything back. to fight, to protect, to make sure they never suffered again. I fired again and again, until my hands were sore, until my body felt like it might collapse from exhaustion. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. The soldiers were beginning to retreat. The sound of their hooves grew fainter, their voices fading into the storm. We had won, but it didn't feel like a victory. Not really. Not after everything we had lost. The price of survival was always too high. The blood on the ground, the faces of the fallen. It was a reminder of the cost of fighting, a reminder of the sacrifice that we had made, that we would continue to make, as long as we were alive. I stood there, my rifle in my hands, watching the soldiers retreat into the storm. My body was covered in sweat and blood, my legs trembling from the effort. But I didn't collapse. I didn't fall. We had won. But the war wasn't over, and it never would be. "Stay alert," I said, my voice quiet but strong. "This isn't over, but we've shown them we won't give up." The women nodded, their faces grim but determined. We had survived this fight, and we would survive the next one. We would keep fighting for as long as we could, because we had to, for our people, for our future. We fought because we had no choice, and that was enough. The battle was over. The smoke of gunfire still hung in the air, but the soldiers had retreated, their bodies lying scattered across the battlefield. We had won, but the victory came at a terrible cost. 2 Apache women, brave and strong, lay motionless on the ground, their lives stolen in the chaos. I knelt beside them, my heart heavy with grief. Their faces were still, their bodies broken. It was a price we had paid for survival, but it felt too high. "We won," I whispered to myself, but the words felt hollow. But at what cost? I stood, wiping the blood from my hands, and turned to the women still standing, their faces marked with the same pain I felt in my chest. We had fought, but we had lost, too. 2 lives. 2 warriors. 2 mothers. The weight of it crushed me, but there was no time for mourning. Not now. I looked to Tobias. He stood beside me, his face a mask of exhaustion. But there was something else there too. Something different. Something I hadn't seen before. I had doubted him. I had doubted everyone, convinced that no one could be trusted. I had built walls around myself, around my heart, because the world had taught me that trust was a weakness, that it would be taken from me, just like everything else. But Tobias, he had shown me something different. I walked over to him, my steps slow, deliberate. The others were still tending to the wounded, but in this moment it was just the 2 of us. "Tobias," I said, my voice low but steady, "thank you." He didn't say anything at first. He didn't need to. His eyes met mine, and in them, I saw the same thing I had seen when he first opened his door to us. The same thing I had seen when he stood by us in the fight. A man who didn't back down. A man who fought for something more than himself. "You didn't just save us," I said, my voice cracking. "You didn't just give us shelter. You didn't leave us to die. You stayed. You fought." His face softened. He didn't smile, but his eyes held something I couldn't name. "I didn't know what I was doing," he admitted, his voice rough. "I was just trying to survive. But I couldn't let you all die. I couldn't." I nodded, feeling something shift inside me. It wasn't just gratitude. It wasn't just relief. It was trust. It was the understanding that sometimes, in this world of blood and betrayal, there were still people worth fighting for, worth trusting. Tobias wasn't a warrior, but he had shown me something that had been lost to me for so long. "We fight because we have to," I said, the words coming from somewhere deep inside. "But sometimes we fight because we believe in something better, something more than just surviving." Tobias didn't respond at first, but he didn't need to. His presence was enough. His actions had spoken louder than words. "Thank you," I said again, my voice steady now. "Thank you for not leaving us." And in that moment, I realized something that had eluded me for so long. Trust was what kept us alive. Trust was the thread that bound us together, even in a world that seemed hell-bent on tearing us apart. I had learned a hard lesson today, one I had been too afraid to learn for too long. Even in the darkest times, even in the worst of battles, there were still people who could be trusted. There were still allies, still warriors who would stand with you when the world turned its back. And it was that trust, built through pain, through sacrifice, that would carry us forward. I turned back to the battlefield, my heart still heavy with loss, but also with something else, something stronger, the resolve to keep going, to keep fighting, for the women who stood with me, for the ones we had lost, for the future we were still trying to build. We had made it through this fight, but it wasn't over, and as long as I had breath in my lungs, I would keep fighting, for them, for Tobias, and for the future we still believed in. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. In the end, Ayana's journey teaches us something vital. Trust and sacrifice are what keep us going, even when the world feels like it's falling apart. In a life filled with betrayal and loss, she learns that trusting others, even when it feels impossible, is the key to survival. It's easy to get lost in fear, to build walls around your heart, but sometimes we need to tear those walls down. Only by trusting, by standing together, can we find strength. This lesson applies to all of us. In times of struggle, whether it's personal or professional, we often have to make the choice to trust those around us and fight for what's right. We can't do it alone, and the courage to stand with others is what leads to change. So, as we move forward in our own battles, let Ayana's story be a reminder that no matter the odds, we must trust those who stand beside us and never forget that sometimes fighting together is the only way to survive. If Ayana's journey resonates with you, don't hesitate. Trust in the strength of those around you and fight for a better tomorrow. Like, share, and subscribe for more stories that inspire courage, unity, and survival. Let's stand together, just like Ayana did.